long as they have convinced themselves that that's what they want to do.
They don't even have to convince themselves; they just want to do it. And an example that's used by a friend of ours who works with us is that suppose you're a starving person, and there is a heavy wooden door, and behind that door there is food, and you take an axe and you spend as much time and effort as necessary chopping on that door with the axe to get to that food. Mm-hmm. Well, a psychopath would do that even if the door was a human being, or 1,000 human beings, or 1,000,000 human beings. And it would be, to them, it would be a door. And it's just between them and what they want.
Right, and so what we have here, and in the White House, is a prime example of somebody who, by his hand or by his order, has literally been responsible for the deaths of, I would say, over 1 million people in his presidency.
Absolutely.
His father, the same thing, with thousands upon thousands of Iraqis.
Hundreds of thousands.
And then we've got the issue with the depleted uranium. The vaccines that they're giving to the soldiers. We're going to have to take a break. That was a short segment. Okay, stick with me, Laura. We'll be back in 3. All right, we're back. Michaeal Herzog. I've got my special guest, Laura Knight Jadczyk, and we're talking about psychopaths. And we've got a long segment coming up here, Laura, so I'm going to let you continue. I have a couple questions for you, but go ahead, continue, and then I'll pop them in when I have a chance.
Well, why don't you just go ahead and ask, because it'll get my brain going here.
Oh, okay. Let's go into the spiritual for a moment, because obviously these people do not have a conscience, and I have noticed, and I'm sure that a lot of us have, I know you have, that if you take a look at specific pictures of Dick Cheney or Condoleezza Rice or even George Bush, there's a certain element of evil in their look, in their eye. And my question is along the spiritual lines, and I know that, George Bush and, John Kerry both have, they're members of the Skull and Bones, and so is George H.W. Bush. And we know that in there they do really weird rituals. And I'm saying, I'm going down to the road of saying that if these people don't have a conscience, are they worshiping the dark side, or they have no conscience, no perception of spirituality, or what?
Well, the funny thing about this is, and this is something that we've really asked some deep questions about and speculated about, and we've observed. The first thing is that you have to understand that most religions, and I don't want to really offend anybody, because most religions have been taken over by psychopaths.
Organized religions.
Yeah, because what happens is with any ideology, and here's an example. Say, for example, the idea of communism. Communism was how the early Christians lived. Mm-hmm. How the so-called Jesus people lived. They lived communistically. But what communism became under, say, for example, Stalin, was absolutely nothing to do with the communistic principles that the Jesus people lived by. Communism under Stalin was basically state corporatism. The state was a giant corporation, and it owned everything, and everybody was a slave to the state. It had nothing to do with people sharing alike with each other. And that's an example of how an ideology can be taken over and subverted and used for completely different purposes. The same thing has happened with, say, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. These religions have been taken over by psychopaths, and most of the principles of the original founders of the religions have been completely turned around in the same way that George Bush can tell us, black is white and white is black, or they're weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Yes, war is peace, yes.
War is peace. And so this is the first thing. The second thing is that by way of these religions, they have inculcated into the 96% of the population that are normal, who are not these genetic deviants, these atavistic throwbacks, probably to something like Neanderthal, and have convinced everybody that everybody is created equal and everybody has a soul. And so all of us normal, bleeding heart, liberal type people who love everybody and want to fix the world and want everybody to be nice and get along, grow up believing that all you have to do is love everybody enough, be nice enough, share enough, give enough, and even the most hardened criminal can be saved, can be salvaged.
Right, but I don't mean to interrupt you, but that brings a question to mind that really the normal thinking individual is, if you will, a victim because of their weakness of believing such a thing.
Absolutely, that's the whole problem. And you see, psychopaths, they understand that. They study us like some sort of a bug under a microscope. They know how to push and pull our emotional buttons. They know how to inspire us with, well, you're either with us or you're against us. Patriotism. Mom, the flag and apple pie, and to use all of these kinds of things on the 96%, and they are able to do it without meaning a word of it, and able to use emotional words that have no content for them, so that the person who is a normal person who is listening says, oh, he says that, he was very sad about the deaths of all of those soldiers, and I saw a tear trickle out his eye, and it made me feel so warm and fuzzy that he cares so much about us, and it's all bullcrap.
Well, let me ask you this, now, because since you bring that up, I noticed when this massacre happened at Virginia Tech University, he got on there and he was talking about how saddened he was and blah, blah, blah. And we know that's a lie. But do you think that these people really, some part of the motivation for what they do, and I'm not saying all of it, but I'm saying part of the motivation for what they do is because maybe they envy what we have that they don't, and they actually hate us? Or do you think it's just a totally different agenda than that? They
do not envy us. If you watch that freaky alien movie, Independence Day, when the alien, is inside the glass cage.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the guy says to him, what do you want? What do you want from this? He says, I want you dead, die. That's basically the whole thing with the psychopaths. They do not envy us, and any of them who come along and try to pull on your heartstrings by making you think that, oh, well, there's, I'm so sad, because you have something I can't have and I'll never have, and don't you feel sorry for me? That is a big trap. It's a pity trap, because one of the number one tools that the psychopath uses when they feel like they're losing control of their victim is the pity ploy. Feel sorry for me. I don't have what you have. You have such a rich life. No, they believe firmly that it is their destiny to rule the world, and they believe firmly that it is the destiny of everybody else to serve them.
Well, tell me, in your estimation, we have, 535 members of Congress, 100 senators, and we have members of the cabinet and so forth. So we've probably got 700 or so actual government, top-level federal government officials. In your estimation, what percentage of those do you think would probably fall into this category? The large majority, half and half, a small majority of them?
The large majority.
Majority. Because
and the ones who aren't, genetic deviants have been made psychopathic by the environment, and they have dirty laundry. And you don't think that George Bush and those guys were doing that, illegal wiretapping to listen to John Q. Public, do you?
Well, that brings up another thought. I've noticed about some people that if they are literally an evil person, somebody that is, a liar, a cheater, they think everybody else thinks like they do, and they're paranoid. Consequently, I think that part of the reason for the wiretapping and watching the emails and so forth is they're so paranoid. They think that people think along the same lines as they do.
Well, I think that they were getting information to control all of the judiciary and all the members of Congress and all the journalists and all the people in corporate positions that they couldn't control because they weren't deviants.
Well,
they were just compiling information, so that they could control. Look at how the Dems just, rolled over and played dead on every single thing that they said they were going to do.
Mm-hmm. The left-right paradigm is a facade. They've got their marching orders. They're all controlled, whether it be because they're a psychopath or whether it be because they are compromised. They're all controlled. Mm-hmm. The large majority of them. There's a couple of them I can think of that aren't. Ron Paul is one of them. But
very few.
Very, very few. You can count them on one hand.
Yeah.
and even if they're not, by the time they get to a place to have any real power, or if they're running for real power, they are faced with the the option, or they were tempted with compromise, or they are ultimately faced with the option of converting or killed. Okay.
Yeah.
The last person I could think of that actually made it to the presidency, and I think, and again, listeners out there, I'm not saying it was, but I think that he was uncompromised, was John F. Kennedy. Okay.
Yeah.
Ever since then, it's been downhill. But another fact, or another thought that I had is that, regarding their, how do I want to say it? Their sexual persuasion. I know that we've seen a lot of scandal with pedophilia in the White House, with homosexuality. Are these people? Long as they have convinced themselves that that's what they want to do.
They don't even have to convince themselves; they just want to do it. And an example that's used by a friend of ours who works with us is that suppose you're a starving person, and there is a heavy wooden door, and behind that door there is food, and you take an axe and you spend
or by his order, has literally been responsible for the deaths of, I would say, over 1 million people in his presidency.
Absolutely.
His father, the same thing, with thousands upon thousands of Iraqis.
Hundreds of thousands.
And then we've got the issue with the depleted uranium, the vaccines that they're giving to...
as much time and effort as necessary, chopping on that door with the axe to get to that food. Mm-hmm. Well, a psychopath would do that even if the door was a human being, or 1,000 human beings, or 1 million human beings. And it would be, to them, it would be a door. And it's just between them and what they want.
Right, and so what we have here, and in the White House, is a prime example of somebody who, by his hand, the soldiers. We're going to have to take a break. That was a short segment. Okay, stick with me, Laura. We'll be back in 3. All right, we're back. Michael Herzog. Got my special guest, Laura Knight Jadczyk, and we're talking about psychopaths. And we've got a long segment coming up here, Laura. So I'm going to let you continue. I have a couple questions for you, but go ahead, continue, and then I'll pop them in when I have a chance.
Well, why don't you just go ahead and ask, because it'll get my brain going here.
Oh, okay. Let's go into the spiritual for a moment, because obviously these people do not have a conscience, and I have noticed, and I'm sure that a lot of us have. I know you have. That if you take a look at specific pictures of Dick Cheney or Condoleezza Rice,